Naji, one of the common themes that we've heard throughout this broadcast is innovation. How good Amazon are at it, maybe how challenging it is to do for other people. You live and breathe innovation at Salmon. You're advising some of the biggest names in retail at Salmon. How do people need to go about the whole process of innovation today when the gold standard is so far ahead?
Well, I think it all comes down to a different mindset. So a lot of the time it's going into brands and actually talking to them and saying, right, how do you need to innovate in a way that's new and different, because the way you're doing it now doesn't really work so well, because they're kind of fixated on everything they have to do has to be complete, ready, has every single feature known to man, and is ready for the customer. I think what's changed now is Amazon's really pushing brands to have to be trying new things and willing to fail on those new things. And I think probably one of the biggest changes is that a lot of these brands feel like they don't want to go first. And unfortunately, we're now at the point where you haven't got time to let someone else go first, try it and go, oh, actually that's a really good idea, we'll start to use that.
So being a fast follower now is not a good strategy?
I don't think it's good enough. I think now is the point where I don't think Amazon looks at other people and goes, right, we're going to copy those guys. They go off ahead, they think really intensely about what they need to do, and they just go off and they execute. And I think that's the important part.
I mean, one of the interesting things about, you're talking about failure, I think people sometimes forget when you look at the list of companies that Amazon have acquired, about a third of them, in a sense, they have abandoned. They've walked away from, clearly decided that for whatever reasons, might have been a good purchase, but hasn't turned out right in the end.
Well, I mean, look at the Fire Phone. That was a lot of investment, and that was a new thing for them to try, and they gave it a year or two, and it didn't work, so they canned it and they moved on to something else. And I think that's something that's representative of quite a lot of the companies that are really leading the marketplace. If you're first, you are going to fail, but you need to accept that failure doesn't mean that you're bad at what you do. It just means you tried something, it didn't work, you accepted that. And I mean, even you look at my favorite example is Glass. So from Google, that was seen as quite a bit of a failure. But actually the software that came from that is in Google's Pixel phone, which is rated the best camera phone, because they had to think differently about how the camera on Glass works. So trying new things doesn't always lead to a complete failure. You have to try these new things to learn and just accelerate your growth.
Traditional organisation structures sort of stifle innovation at birth. From your knowledge now, how much does structure and organisation play a part in successful innovation?
Quite a lot. What I've seen is people can have a lot of good ideas and they can present them back and unfortunately get shut down quite quickly. Where I've seen it succeed is where the organizational structure allows for people to be a little bit more independent and have a little bit more ownership, because they want the company to do well, because obviously they're working in it. Hopefully they won't give an idea that they know is crap. So it's really about giving people a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more freedom to try things out. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I go in and talk to brands about is, it's not just about rolling out and getting 10 devs and 5 designers to come up with ideas. It's a completely different mindset that you need to work on here, because what happens when those guys come up with something and present it back to the board and the board just shuts them down and says, no, actually we're going to stick with this, in which case all that time is kind of wasted. So I think part and parcel is the cultural changes that the brands will have to make enabled to actually keep up with companies like Amazon.
And how do you balance the innovation side of the business, which is fun and exciting, versus the business as usual side of the business that generates all the cash?
So I think it comes down to everything that my team does is really focused in solving a business problem and ensuring that we're not just going off and doing crazy things like, oh, HoloLens is out, we're going to just build something on HoloLens. We actually sit down, we talk to our analytics team, we go, right, what's the market size for this? How many users is there? Is this even a good idea? Go out and ask people. And then once we are happy with that and we believe that we're in a good place, that is when we start building things. And I think that's the key. It's making sure that you're not building for building's sake. you're actually going out there, getting the data, because data is important, and knowing that this is actually a reasonably good idea and you've got, say, above 50% chance of it working. At which point, what you've come up with will probably take a couple of years for it to come to fruition, but at least you've done the work now and you can kind of build up to being able to do that.
Finally, you specialise at Salmon at a lot of e-commerce for big retailers. What are you seeing now in the interrelationship between the physical store and technology and the virtual store?
I think brands now realize it's extremely key to try and join the dots between their user who's online and that user that walks in the store. And there's a massive gap there of understanding what technology will allow you to bridge that gap. I think there's a lot of questions being asked about, how do we do this? I think it's kind of our job to go in there and kind of figure that out for them and try and solve it in a way that gives them a much smoother experience. So I think what's changed now is there are more questions being asked. Brands are getting a lot more tech savvy. We're seeing more and more people understanding innovation. We're going out talking to them. Part of what my team does is to talk to brands and try and just teach them about what is out there, because you don't know what you don't know. And you can end up just sitting in your own little bubble and not even thinking about other industries and how they're doing things. So I think that's really important for us, is to ensure that we're advising in a way that brings all the technology to them so they can achieve their goals.
Naji, finally, bring, I suppose, it back to where we started in terms of Amazon and Whole Foods. Do you think we're going to look back at whenever the acquisition happens, assuming it does, and say actually that was a defining moment in the relationship between physical retail and virtual retail?
I think so. I think it's especially with Amazon Go, I think this is going to be a big step change. I mean, the fact that they've got 431 new distribution centers is massive, but it also shows that the experience they didn't have in retail stores and actual brick and mortar has suddenly been increased dramatically because they've now bought a company that knows how to make beautiful shops, beautiful stands, and get people into their stores. So I think it's going to be a seminal moment for Amazon, especially for other brands, to realize that technology is going to end up being key in delivering a really good experience, not just for their online, but also their in-store as well.
Naji, thanks very much indeed.
No worries.